Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to a very special patch 9.1 PTR update. So earlier this week we learned the release date of the patch, which is going to be, the patch comes out on the 30th or the 29th, depending on which region you are, of June of this month and of this year, which was an open question for a while. Here is the raid unlock schedule, which notably is a little bit of a deviation from what they normally do. Usually you see 2 weeks between the patch and normal and heroic week. This time there's only a 1 week gap, which means July 6th, the second Tuesday of the patch, will be the normal and heroic wings opening. And then July 13th, the third Tuesday of the patch, right, will be when we get Mythic and when we get the first Raid Finder wing. And then the Raid Finder wings will open as per usual. Every 2 weeks a new wing will open for the future there. So, good news, bad news. There's been some takes I've been seeing on Twitter that have been critical of this because they feel like there's been some conspiracy theories I've been seeing about Blizzard having some kind of external pressure, maybe from that article about Final Fantasy catching up in sub numbers that has caused them to rush this thing out. I don't think that, I wouldn't put too much weight into those personally, but there is some criticism I think that lands for me here, which is I do think it would be nice if they gave us a little bit longer time to know when the patch is going to be, particularly for the World First race. It's actually not something that's really going to impact like Limit or Echo, but those guilds in World like 3 through 20 that are trying to catch up or maybe compete even with those two guilds are in this position where they still have a lot of their raiders that are, working. And so having a slightly longer notice would make it easier for them to be competitive with Limit and Echo, which I think is something that Blizzard should at least... I don't know too much about their other concerns, but at least for the World First race, I think that it would be a good thing if they told us a little bit further in advance. However, I understand that the World First race is a pretty small thing. And again, it doesn't affect those top two guilds because they don't, they can raid whenever. They can do it at a drop of a hat. It would be nice though for some others. I mean, it makes sense, right? Blizzard, they don't want to announce it too early because patch dates change. We've seen this happen in the past. So the later you announce it, the closer to the announcement date, the less likely that happens. It's reasonable to think that way. And also just, it's nice to not overhype something, announce a content patch 2 months in advance, and by the time it actually rolls around, maybe people are bored, maybe as soon as they hear it's coming out, they stop playing the current patch as much, it stops being as exciting. I'm not sure. All I know is that I think it's pretty funny the quick whiplash I've been getting from seeing some of the same Twitter profiles that were saying, oh, 9.0 is taking way too long, where's the patch? To as soon as the patch date is announced, being like, no, this is too soon. But I don't want to ramble too much about this topic in this video. I'm sure I already have. I'm sure half of you have already turned this thing off, because there are some important discoveries from the newest PTR build, which is, first of all, it's the first one to be called a release candidate, which means, provided there's no big issues, they could just launch this thing. I wouldn't take this as proof positive that there's not going to be any further PTR builds or changes, but it mostly just means like, hey, we need to make sure that this one can work now, right? We need to make sure that we could actually launch this patch, and it would be fine. And so that's what's happened here. First change that I want to talk about is the Necrotic Affix Nerf. If you saw my video with Tettles over on his channel, we talked about this and a bunch of other changes that came in the PTR build on Tuesday, which you should go check out if you haven't. And one of those changes was this Necrotic Nerf that made it so that every single mob in dungeons only applies Necrotic on every other successful auto attack. The way it worked in Legion was just every auto attack would apply Necrotic. The way it worked in BFA and in Shadowlands Season 1 was that boss mobs would apply on every other auto attack, and then the rest of the dungeon would apply still on every attack. And then on the Tuesday build here, they just made it so the entire dungeon, bosses and trash, would apply Necrotic on every other auto attack, which for all trash, basically, you could think of it as a 50% nerf to the Necrotic Affix. Any situation where you'd have 40 stacks on trash, you would have 20 stacks, or potentially we would have had a drop, but probably not, in the new version of this. So people look at this and I think underestimated how much of an impact this would have had, but I mean, a 50% nerf is a lot. There's a lot of cases where you died in Necrotic because you had 40 stacks and you wouldn't have died if you had 20. And so I think that that's something that... I think people were underestimating just how big of a deal this was going to be, but Blizzard has reverted it. And there was this kind of illuminating post on the forums about it. That this was a reply to a forum post that actually they didn't completely revert it. So lieutenant enemies, the ones that are generally immune to crowd control, are keeping the every other swing behavior, but the regular crowd controllable mobs aren't, right? So you think of stuff like the enraged masks in the other side, those big red things, or probably the warriors as well, right? The ones that you can't crowd control. Those are, and the mini bosses, those are going to have this half as fast Necrotic, but the big swarms of trash mobs, where Necrotic I would say is probably, you know, those are usually involved when Necrotic is a problem, are being reverted to the old version. And then I think there's some useful stuff here, which is, you know, it's a good place to remind ourselves that the test environment is a test environment, and so I think it is reasonable for them to try changes and then tone them back if they think they want to, without us getting as mad as if they actually put it in the live server and then took it away, right? I still think Necrotic should see some more nerfs, but I'm actually kind of glad that they have chosen to not go with this one in particular, because I would rather see a actual targeted nerf to the affix that looks at what are the problems with this, you know, what are the cases where it's really hurting people's fun, and then fix that, because I'm not actually convinced that the old fix necessarily did that. I think that the way that, like, kiting was by far the best way and often the only way to deal with Necrotic on a lot of pulls. You know, a 50% nerf would have fixed that in a lot of cases, but in a lot of other cases, it wasn't particularly close, right? If you had a minute-long pull and you were getting out of there 10 seconds in, you know, now you could stay in another 10 seconds, but it's not like you could stay in forever. And so I think that conditional on them revisiting Necrotic, which again, this thing has this line at the end, it's probably a little bit more oppressive than we want it to be, so don't be surprised if more tweaks to it hit the PTR over the next few days. So conditional on something like this happening, I'm actually reasonably happy with them taking a different look at how they want to fix this affix. My suggestion for this is to make Necrotic have a duration and gain stacks, but not refresh duration when you get autoed. And they could rebalance the other numbers a little bit around it if they need to as well. And that way, you know, you can go in, you take Necrotic, you have these moments where you're unhealable, you maybe need to kite for a bit, but you don't have this situation where it's just like, okay, you need to run away now for the rest of this pull because Necrotic is making it impossible. So that's what I would like to see them do with Necrotic. I think there's a lot of good answers for it. One thing that doesn't give me too much hope is what they've done with bolstering and raging. Bolstering is really the one here that's the affix I take issue with how they've nerfed. So here are the newest ones. Raging has a nerf to 75% increased damage until defeated, down from 100. I didn't find Raging to be a particularly oppressive affix before, but in general, I'm fine with affixes becoming less impactful because I think that dungeons are more fun when the affixes are less of what they're about. And in particular, I think Raging was an affix that could be pretty punishing for, like, it could be very punishing for those mid to low level groups. So it seems like a reasonable one to tone down there, even if it wasn't a problem for high keys. And then bolstering, this is the one where you told me bolstering was going to get nerfed, I'd be like, oh my goodness, finally. Finally they are nerfing bolstering. So now bolstering, instead of increasing health and damage by 20% per stack, increases health by 15% and damage by 20%. Which, again, numerical nerfs I think are underrated in terms of how much people put stock into them. I think people often assume that, like, hey, this affix is broken at the core, whereas for a lot of affixes, you know, if you just cut their numbers by a lot, that goes a really, really long way towards fixing them. With bolstering in particular, I think bolstering often had these, like, checkmate bolsters you'd get, where a patrol pulled and it suddenly has 5 bolstering stacks, and you're just like, this is impossible. And I don't think that this will affect too many of those cases. On the one hand, you know, don't pull patrols. Okay, I'm fine with that. On the other hand, I think it would be good if the affix, you know, punished you less than it currently does when you screw up against it. So again, my suggestion for bolstering, much like Necrotic, is give it a duration, make it fall off after a certain amount of time. And I'm kind of sad to see this nerf because it makes me think they won't look at doing something else to it than this. But it's still better than nothing. It's better than having not seen any changes to bolstering. I don't think it will do anything, though, to change. Here, let's go open up the mplus.subcreation.net site. I talk about this in a lot of my videos. If you look at their statistically generated tier list of how difficult the affixes are going to be, you'll notice there's a common affix shared by the 2 worst weeks by the statistical measures here. And I don't think there's a coincidence here. I think that this is something that, warrants some further investigation. Coincidentally, Necrotic is 2 of the bottom 3 as well on this list. Okay, so that's the affixes happening here. Other news from PTR, in case you want to be caught up, is survival. We've got another slight single target buff here to flanking strike. It's going to scale a little bit better with attack power. And yeah, that's it. Basically nothing else. All these other changes are tooltip changes, PvP multiplier changes. Not too much else happening in this release candidate. There is that kind of ray of hope that they're looking to do a little bit more to Necrotic, so maybe we're going to see a new PTR build. Maybe it will contain a few more tweaks. But in general, the fact that we are less than 14 days from the patch now, the fact that we've got this release candidate, means that if you were waiting on your spec to get another look from Blizzard, it probably already was, but definitely is now much more likely than not that you're going to be with the current version of your spec that is on PTR right now for the rest of this patch. So that's the end of this little video. Over the next couple days, I intend to make a in-depth look at the Shard of Domination system and its implications for gearing. I think that's going to be really important, and I think a lot of people don't actually understand how that is going to affect our legendary gearing, how good raid gear is versus PvP and Mythic Plus gear. So I think that video is going to be an important one. Stay tuned for that. Hit subscribe and stuff. If you want to hear me and Tettles talk about all the M Plus changes, including the Necrotic one that just got reverted, there's a video on his channel you should go check out. We're doing this like alternating thing where we do this weekly video, but we switch which channel it's on every week, so gotta subscribe to both if you want to catch that. And yeah, come check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Ratnos, where as soon as this patch comes out, I'll be streaming more. So actually, you know what? I want to level some characters as well. I want to get all the characters up to 60, so that I can maybe make some guide content next patch on a lot of them. So anyways, that's what's been going on here. Hope you had a good one. Hope you liked this little video. Let me know in the comments below where you agree or disagree with me. Obviously, keep it civil, please. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.